Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Unionist politicians in Northern Ireland have been accused of bad manners for not meeting the EU's chief Brexit negotiator on his own visit to towns along the border with the Irish Republic. Michel Barnier is in Londonderry today on the second day of his visit to discuss possible solutions to customs arrangements after Brexit. Let's talk to Sky's Darren McCaffrey, who is live there for us. And Darren, are they being rude? Is there any obligation on them to meet him?
There is no obligation. Many people would say, though, of course, if the complaint is that unionist and pro-Brexit choices are not being listened to in Brussels from Northern Ireland, that the best way, of course, to try and influence Michel Barnier and the Brexit process is to try and do it while he is here. But as you say, the DUP have refused to do so. Arlene Foster suggesting yesterday that he is not an honest, independent broker, Michel Barnier, and saying that he does not understand the unionist point of view. They have met in the past, but as you say, they have not met, despite the fact that Michel Barnier has been here in Northern Ireland for the last day or so. He is in Derry. The questions, though, this morning, though, have been about that vote in the House of Lords last night. Clearly, Michel Barnier still thinks there is a risk that these Brexit talks could still fall apart on the issue of the Irish border. He made that clear yesterday, but he was asked about the parliamentary arithmetic of that vote last night. There were many different cogs, including, of course, domestic British politics, and this was his response.
I don't want, and never, from the beginning of my mission, I never intervene in the national and domestic policy of the UK. So I respect the British Parliament, as we ask to be respected, but I don't want to intervene in the internal and national process of ratification of the deal.
And Michel Barnier this morning has been meeting, Jane, lots of representatives, primarily, it must be said, anti-Brexit voices in the Guildhall here in Derry. You may remember during the referendum campaign, actually, the Peace Bridge, which was built, in the last decade or so, after the Good Friday Agreement. That is where John Major and Tony Blair famously walked across during the EU referendum campaign, suggesting that it could put the peace process here in Northern Ireland to question, I suppose, if there was a Brexit vote. But this is the message that greeted Michel Barnier when he arrived here this morning. A reminder, of course, that Londonderry, Derry voted to remain inside the European Union, as did the whole of Northern Ireland. And of these historic walls, Michel Barnier has just done a walkabout on these walls. This is a city where history looms large, and that history, of course, is concern over the peace process and what happens to that border. We are only a few miles from the Irish border here in Londonderry. And it was also notable as well, Jane, today that Michel Barnier made it clear that he thinks the peace funding, that is money that flows from Brussels to Northern Ireland and has done for decades, will continue despite Brexit well into the 2020s. A reminder that irrespective of what is happening in this process, that Northern Ireland and Northern Irish citizens do have a unique place in the UK, because they have automatic right to Irish citizenship, and after March of next year that means to EU citizenship. So, as I say, there are lots of different cogs, there are lots of different voices here. Not everyone is on the same page when we look at what the DUP have to say when they feel that their voice has not been listened to. But what this visit was all about is Brussels saying, along with Dublin, that ultimately they will, irrespective of what's happening in Westminster and elsewhere, try and keep this border as open and frictionless as possible, or that there will be no deal, no withdrawal agreement in October.
Darren, many thanks.
In other news today, Theresa May has vowed to respond robustly to her government's latest setback in Parliament over Brexit. The defeat in the House of Lords last night was the 7th and the most significant, because the proposed amendment would give MPs the power to stop Britain leaving without a deal, and it would force the Prime Minister back to the negotiating table. The International Trade Secretary Liam Fox, who was a leading Leave campaigner, accused peers of trying to thwart the will of the people.
We're not staying in the customs union. We're not joining a customs union. We voted to leave the European Union, and that requires us to be outside the customs union and outside the single market. Now we have the unelected House actually trying to block the democratic will of the British people, and we had a Labour frontbench spokesman voting last night against their own party policy to have a second referendum. This is a question about whether the will of the British people will be respected or not, and it must be.
Well, problems with the government in Parliament. Meanwhile, David Davis has been talking to the EU committee on what issues are locked down in the negotiations with the EU. Here's what he said in the past hour.
I guess the best summary was Michel Barnier, who said that we are at 75% a couple of weeks ago, but the last 25% is the hardest. We've locked down the whole chapters on citizens' rights and finance, which are obviously very important. But we have outstanding, and we're working on this literally. I mean, my officials, not today, because today's a bank holiday in Brussels, but generally speaking, they've been in Brussels a considerable amount of time. The outstanding areas that are not locked down are obviously Northern Ireland, which people know about, but also some elements of remaining separation issues, which I'll come back to in a second, and also the governance of the agreement, which sounds very bland, but actually is quite controversial.
Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's in Westminster for us. Sorry, John, I was going to go to the screen there, but there you are in front of me. David Davis talking about what's been locked down there, but what happened in the Lords kind of points to, even if things get locked down, it might get sent back.
Yes, David Davis was speaking actually at the Lords European Committee today. He presumably resisted the temptation to have a go at them over the way they voted. Plenty of ministers are pretty furious with peers like Michael Heseltine, Chris Patten, John Gummer, David Willits, ex-ministers. And of course, the proposer of that amendment last night was Douglas Hogg, now Lord Hailsham from the Hailsham dynasty. He's the one, if you remember, a few years back who had the moat, claimed for it on expenses. He's now in the Lords. But there's fury among ministers, certainly. And they are vowing to overturn it in the Commons. Easier said than done, though, because, of course, the government lost a similar vote on a similar motion proposed by Dominic Grieve by 11... there were 11 Conservative rebels last time, 19 in the Lords last night. And one of those 11, as today, Heidi Allen has signalled she's likely to vote the same way again. So it's all very well the government talking about being robust, but they haven't got the numbers in the House of Commons. The peer that Liam Fox referred to was Lord Hunt, former Labour minister. He was taken into the chief whip and the leader of the Lord's office for a dressing down, but he's kept his job. Clearly there is some dissent on the Labour side as well, particularly on the Labour side on this issue of whether to back a second referendum. But numbers are key in all of this, in the Lords and in the Commons.
Now, I feel bad because we keep saying on this programme that we're about to hit a crunch point in the Brexit talks, and it never quite happens. We always seem to move on without a final decision on what shape our future relationship with the EU will look like or how we'll solve the Irish border issue. So we should be hesitant in saying that tomorrow is a crucial moment when the Cabinet Brexit Subcommittee sits down to try to work out the government's view on how to shape post-Brexit customs arrangements. It is going to be an important day. Ministers do have to thrash out a government view on customs arrangement and what they look like. And the feeling has been that this could be messy. It could even break the government apart because the Prime Minister's favourite customs option is hated by Brexiteers. But Newsnight's learned Theresa May hopes she may just have a way to hold her party together on the issue, for the time being at least. Could a deal between Remainers and Brexiteers really be in prospect? Here's Nick Watt with what he's learned.
An elite group of ministers may hold the fortunes of Britain in their hands as they make one of the most important decisions of the Brexit process. Just what sort of customs relationship should the UK have with the EU? Theresa May has ruled out membership of the customs union, or a milder version known as a customs union. And so the 11 ministers on the Cabinet Subcommittee overseeing the Brexit negotiations will consider two options. A new customs partnership in which the UK would mirror EU rules for goods arriving in the UK. the Prime Minister's chief EU advisor, Ollie Robbins, believes this would remove the need for a UK-EU border whilst allowing the UK to negotiate its own trade deals. But it is opposed by David Davis, who favours a customs arrangement which would use new technology to create as frictionless a border as possible. David Davis is unhappy with the first option because, as one ally told Newsnight, the idea is hugely complicated and could be used as a way of keeping us in the EU through the back door.
Certainly there would be a lot of very disappointed Brexiteers if we were to end up in the customs partnership, and I think that the Prime Minister's calculations have got to include exactly what reaction there would be both from the Parliamentary Party and the wider Conservative Party if we were to enter into that sort of relationship.
The other Brexiteers on the committee, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson and Liam Fox, share these reservations about the partnership plan. At crunch moments, they hope to rely on the support of the Defence Secretary, who's leaned in their direction since the referendum. The Leavers hope their numbers could be strengthened by the arrival on the committee of the new Home Secretary, who wavered before eventually supporting the Remain side. But Downing Street has not given up hope of finding common ground between the Leavers and the other Remain supporters on the committee, David Liddington, Philip Hammond, Greg Clark and Karen Bradley.
In Downing Street, they are keen to avoid talk of a war cabinet and a showdown between ministers. Aides stress this is a Prime Minister who likes to achieve consensus.
And Theresa May does not have to reach a deal at tomorrow's meeting.
So, talk of a showdown is out, but work is underway on a grand customs bargain. Theresa May is expected to tell the Brexiteers that signing up to the customs partnership could be the best way of killing off a Commons rebellion on a customs union. Give ground here, and the pro-European Tories will hopefully give ground there, is expected to be her message.
No Member of Parliament comes into politics in order to vote against their own party. Brexit is complicated enough, but what we're not going to do is make trade harder for the many businesses in this country, nor make peace in Northern Ireland something that we put at risk and destabilise the situation there. So there's some hard conversations to be had, but I can say that Members of Parliament do want to have those conversations with the Cabinet.
Theresa May could see a turn in her fortunes amid signs of calm in parts of the Tory tribe. But some Brexiteers are digging in against the customs partnership, which Michael Gove regards as bonkers.
Nick, what?